Chapter 32. The Chicago police worked under a media blitz, a nightly news countdown to the next full moon. 11 days were left. Chicago families were frightened. At the same time, attendance rose at horror movies that should have died at the drive-ins in a week. Fascination and horror. The entrepreneur who hit the punk rock market with Tooth Fairy t-shirts came out with an alternative line that said, "The Red Dragon is a one-night stand." Sales were divided about equally between the two. Jack Crawford himself had to appear at a news conference with police officials after the funeral. He had received orders from above to make the federal presence more visible. He did not make it more audible, as he said nothing. When heavily manned investigations have little to feed on, they tend to turn upon themselves, covering the same ground over and over, beating it flat. They take on the circular shape of a hurricane or a zero. Wherever Graham went, he found detectives, cameras, a rush of uniformed men, and the insistent crackle of radios. He needed to be still. Crawford, ruffled from his news conference, found Graham at nightfall in the quiet of an unused jury room on the floor above the U.S. prosecutor's office. Good lights hung low over the green felt jury table when Graham spread out his papers and photographs. He had taken off his coat and tie, and he was slumped in a chair, staring at two photographs. The leads' framed picture stood before him, and beside it, on a clipboard propped against a caraffe, was a picture of the Jacobys. Graham's pictures reminded Crawford of a bullfighter's folding shrine, ready to be set up in any hotel room. There was no photograph of Lowndes. He suspected that Graham had not been thinking about Lowndes' case at all. He didn't need trouble with Graham. "Looks like a pool room in here," Crawford said. "Didn't you knock him dead?" Graham was pale but sober. He had a quart of orange juice in his fist. "Jesus." Crawford collapsed in a chair. "You try to think out there. It's like trying to take a piss on a train." "Any news?" "The commissioner was popping sweat over a question and scratched his balls on television. That's the only notable thing I saw. Watch at 6 and 11 if you don't believe it." "Want some orange juice?" "I'd just as soon swallow barbed wire." "Good. More for me." Graham's face was drawn. His eyes were too bright. "How about the gas?" "God bless Lisa Lake. There are 41 cervical Supreme franchise stations in Greater Chicago. Captain Osborne's boys swarmed those, checking sales and containers to people driving vans and trucks. Nothing yet, but they haven't seen all shifts. Zervco has 186 other stations. They're scattered over 8 states. We've asked for help from the local jurisdictions. It'll take a while. If God loves me, he used a credit card. There's a chance." "Not if he can suck a siphon hose, there isn't." "I asked the commissioner not to say anything about the Tooth Fairy maybe living in this area. These people are spooked enough. If he told them that, this place would sound like Korea tonight when the drunks come home. You still think he's close? Don't you? It figures, Will. Crawford picked up the 𝘠𝘬𝘢𝑆 autopsy report and peered it through the half glasses. The bruise on his head was older than the mouth injuries. 5 to 8 hours older, they're not sure. Now, the mouth injuries were hours old when they got Lowndes to the hospital. They were burned over too, but inside his mouth they could tell. He retained some chloroform in his. Hell's someplace in his wheeze. You think he was conscious when the tooth fairy bit him? Yes. He would want him to be awake. That's what I figure. All right. He takes him out with a lick on the head. That's in the garage. He has to keep him quiet with chloroform until he gets him someplace where the noise won't matter. Brings him back and gets here hours after the bite. He could have done it all in the back of the van, parked way out somewhere, Graham said. Crawford massaged the sides of his nose with his fingers, giving his voice a megaphone effect. You're forgetting about the wheels on the chair. Bev got 2 kinds of carpet furs, wool and synthetic. Synthetic's from a van, maybe, but when you have seen a wool rug in a van, how many wool rugs have you seen in some place you can rent? Damn few. Wool rug is a house, Will. And the dirt and mold were from a dark place from the chair that was stored. A dirt-floored cellar. Maybe. Now look at this. Crawford pulled out a Rand McNally road atlas out of his briefcase. He had drawn a circle on the United States mileage and drive time map. Freddie was gone a little over 15 hours, and his injuries are spaced over that time. I'm going to make a couple of assumptions. I don't like to do that, but here goes. What are you laughing at? I just remember when you ran those field exercises at Quantico, when that trainee told you he assumed something. I don't remember that. You made him write assume on the blackboard. You took the chalk and started underlining and yelling in his face. When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me both. That's what you told him, as I recall. He needed a boot in the ass to shape up. Now, look at this. Figure he had Chicago traffic on Tuesday afternoon, going out of town with Lowndes. Allow a couple of hours to fool with Lowndes at the location where he took him, and then the drive back. He couldn't have gone much farther than 6 hours driving out of Chicago. Okay, this circle around Chicago is 6 hours driving time. See, it's wavy because some roads are faster than others. Maybe he just stayed here. Sure, but this is the farthest away he could be. So you've narrowed it down to Chicago, or inside a circle covering Milwaukee, Madison, Dubuque, Peoria, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Toledo, and Detroit, to name a few. Better than that, we know he got a toddler very fast. Monday night, probably. He could have done that in Chicago. I know it. But once you get out of the town, The tattlers aren't available on Monday night in a lot of locations. Here's a list from the tattlers circulation department. Places tattlers are air, freight, or trucked inside the circle on Monday night. See, that leaves Milwaukee, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and Detroit. They go to the airports and maybe 90 newsstands that stay open all night, not counting the ones in Chicago. I'm using the field officers to check them. Some newsie might remember an odd customer on Monday night. Maybe. That's a good move, Jack. Clearly, Graham's mind was elsewhere. If Graham were a regular agent, Crawford would have threatened him with a lifetime appointment to the Ollertons. Instead, he said, "My brother called this morning. Molly left his house," he said. "Yeah. Someplace safe, I guess?" Graham was confident Crawford knew exactly where she went.
Oh, Marshall, you stop it. Being too kind.
Willie's grandparents. Well, they'll be glad to see the kid. Crawford waited. No comment from Graham. Everything's okay, I hope. I'm working, Jack. Don't worry about it. No, look. It's just that she got jumpy over there. Graham pulled a flat package tied with a string from beneath a stack of funeral pictures and began to pick at the knot. What's that? It's from Brian Metcalf, the Jacoby's lawyer. Brian Zeller sent it on. It's okay. Wait a minute. Let me see. Crawford turned the package in his hairy fingers until he found the stamp and signature of SF, Semper Fidelis. Annisworth, head of the FBI's explosives section, certifying that the package had been fluoroscoped. Always check. Always check. I always check, Jack. Did Chester bring this to you? Yes. Did he show you the stamp before he handed it out to you? He checked it and showed me. Graham cut the string. It's copies of all the probate business in the Jacoby estate. I asked Metcalf to send it to me. We can compare with the lead stuff when it comes in. We have a lawyer doing that. I need it. I don't know the Jacobys, Jack. They were new in town. I got to Birmingham a month late, and their stuff was scattered to shit and gone. I've got a feel for the leads. I don't for the Jacobys. I need to know them. I want to talk to people they knew in Detroit, and I want a couple of days more in Birmingham. I need you here. Listen, Lowndes was a straight snuff. We made him mad at Lowndes. The only connection to Lowndes is one we made. There's a little hard evidence with Lowndes, and the police are handling it. Lowndes was just an annoyance to him, but the Leedses and the Jacobys are what he needs. We've got to have the connection between them. If we ever get him, that's how we'll do it. So you have the Jacoby paper to use here. Crawford said. What are you looking for? What kind of thing? Any damn thing, Jack. Right now, a medical deduction. Graham pulled out the IRS estate tax form from the package. Lowndes was in a wheelchair. Medical. Valerie Leeds had surgery about 6 weeks before she died. Remember in her diary? A small cyst in her breast. Medical again. I was wondering if Mrs. Jacoby had surgery too. I don't remember anything about surgery in the autopsy report. No, but it might have been something that didn't show. Her medical history was split between Detroit and Birmingham. Something might have gotten lost there. If she had anything done, there will be a deduction claimed and maybe an insurance claim. Some itinerant orderly, you thinking? Worked both places, Detroit or Birmingham and Atlanta? If you spend time in a mental hospital, you pick up the drill. You could pass as an orderly, get a job doing it when you get out. Graham said. Want some dinner? I'll wait till later. I get dumb after I eat. Leaving, Crawford looked back at Graham from the gloom of the doorway. He didn't care for what he saw. The hanging lights deepened the hollows in Graham's face as he studied with the victims staring at him from the photographs. The room smelled of desperation. Would it be better for the case to put Graham back on the street? Crawford couldn't afford to let him burn himself out in here for nothing, but for something? Crawford's excellent administrative skills were not tempered by mercy. They told him to leave Graham alone.